Alright lads, here's the biz. Xeno is on rerun and I need him. I just need him so badly, otherwise I might faint. Forever. And so in typical Genshin Impact YouTuber fashion, welcome to a boring ass rolling video. There are plenty of things out there which Genshin Impact does well. I firmly believe it's not a huge stretch to say that many aspects of the game are simply really good. Say for example, the music, the art direction, and the character designs. But with the game the size and magnitude of Genshin Impact, there are bound to be imperfections lying around, waiting to be noticed or to be released entirely. It's not a strange concept of the game itself or gaming in general whatsoever. Sometimes things really are just that bad. But one of those weird additions dates as far back as the beginning of the game, nearly 3 years ago. And surprisingly enough, I haven't seen many people talk about it extremely in depth. This is the Bell. The Bell is a 4-star Wish exclusive greatsword from the Wanderer's Troop series, which has some pretty fantastic weapons, such as the Widsith, the Stringless, and the Flute. The Bell, however, differs quite a bit from these previously mentioned weapons. It's not really that good. Now, it's not that it's the only bad greatsword in the game, far from it. In fact, you could even make a case for the Rain Slasher or the Unforged to get their own separate videos one day in case this one does well, wink wink, nudge nudge. But back to the item at hand, the Bell has been, for the longest time, without a doubt, the most infamous weapon to be added to the game. Widely considered by many to be the single most useless 4-star for the last 3 years, while simultaneously being one that drops extremely frequently. Due to this, it's part of what I like to call the cheats of 4-star weapons, the Bell, the Eye Perception, and the Rain Slasher, and out of these arguably terrible weapons, it's widely considered to be the worst one. You can see it for yourself, it's a tale as old as time. People went on Hoyolab and Reddit the month the game was out to try and make use of this weapon, only to leave in disappointment upon realizing its flaws, that being how no one could actually make good use of this in comparison to other weapons. Is that still the case, however, even after versions upon versions of new characters with different skill sets being added to the game? Well, let's dive in and find out, as we take a look at the most infamous greatsword in all of Genshin Impact, the Bell. How would you develop a weapon for your video game? Well, I'm no game designer, but for me the answer is rather simple really. A weapon should be implemented with filling a specific role in mind, and also to work in unison with the character currently holding it, and needless to say, this is easier on paper than in actual practice. That's very visible in a game like Genshin Impact, where the player can utilize 4 of the characters they like best, while simultaneously needing these 4 characters to work together properly between themselves and their equipment for maximum efficiency, with every weapon and artifact aiding a character in filling their specific role in the party. To understand this principle better, we can take a look at 2 examples, Zhongli's signature weapon, the Vortex Vanquisher, and literally any other signature weapon, because for some reason unknown to me or anyone else, Zhongli's signature weapon is in fact not really that good on him. So for now, let's take the Redhorn Stone Thresher, Ito's signature weapon, and also the best one to use on well under most circumstances. The Redhorn Stone Thresher does everything it sets out to do perfectly. It helps Ito fill his role as a main DPS by increasing his defense by 28%, a stat which Ito and everything regarding his kit scales off of, and further increasing normal and charge attack damage by 40% of his defense. The Vortex Vanquisher, on the other hand, yeah, there's so much attack. Why is there so much attack? Don't even bother with this weapon. The point remains, however, everything is added to the game for a reason, no matter how silly or weird it may seem, which begs the question. What does the Bell do, and how does it fit, or rather not fit, in Genshin Impact from a design perspective? Well, to find out the answer to this question, we need to do like every TF2 YouTuber and take a look at the weapon's stats. Before we start though, a few things to keep in mind. For this video, I'll take as the basis a level 90 Bell, which if you roll consistently on any banner, it's not unreasonable to achieve. This is not a damage showcase, rather I want to focus more on the story aspect of this weapon throughout the versions, while giving my honest opinion on its current state and what could be done. This is strictly my opinion based on what I have found out while both using the bell and researching videos, discussions and forum threads across the internet. For a game with aspects as ever-evolving and complex as Genshin Impact is, it's basically impossible for me to accurately review the weapon and pinpoint exactly how good or bad it can be under any given circumstance, so don't expect that either. With that out of the way, very much ingrained in your brain, which will definitely not lead people to complain about it in the comments, let's get started. The bell is a great sword which was added in version 1.0 alongside its 3 Wish exclusive contemporaries, and like most weapons has stayed the same gameplay wise ever since. It has an HP percent substat going up to 41.3% and a passive that reads, when a character takes damage, a shield will be generated which absorbs all sorts of damage up to 20% of a character's max HP, a number that goes up to 32% at refinement 5. This shield lasts for 10 seconds or until being broken and can be triggered once every 45 seconds. Side note, despite the number 45 here being blue, it doesn't change with refinements, for some reason. Additionally, when protected by shield, that being not only the shield created by the bell but also a character's elemental skill or a crystallized reaction, a character does 12% more damage, which goes up to 24% at refinement 5. Now, while the bell hasn't changed at all gameplay wise, in version 1.6 an inconsistency in this description was fixed, where it previously read the shield, as in only the bell shield, when in reality any sort of shield works to trigger the damage bonus, warranting the change to a shield. Even more curious, however, is this weapon's state before the game's release. During the game's closed beta test 2, known as version 0.7.1, the bell was much more different than it is now, although not really that different from other weapons. It had a second stat of energy recharge which would max at an unknown percentage, and a passive called retrace. When damaging an enemy with elemental skill, it had a 40% chance of resetting the skill's cooldown, which went up to 80% at refinement 5. If this sounds familiar, that's because these are the exact same passive attributes which were added to the Sacrificial series, although with a different name. Curious bits of trivia aside, you may notice that this description is kind of interesting in the sense that it sounds contradictory. Why would a weapon that lets you deal more damage have an HP percent substat? And that's inherently the problem. Much like the Vortex Vanquisher, these parts of the weapon don't fit together. And not only is it not useful, but it's not even fun to use. Alright, let me explain. Consider this for a moment. September 28th, 2020, Genshin Impact gets released. There's no Dragonspine, no Inazuma, no Sumeru, and the bell is introduced. Being a claymore, obviously it's of no use to characters that don't carry around a massive stick in their hands all the time, so the roster of characters which could even wield the weapon was limited to 4. Noelle, Chongyun, Diluc, and Beidou. Now, taking a look back at the bell stats, we can quite easily infer that a character which would work best with these goofy-ass stats would be a character which has 1 HP scaling and optionally 2 shield generation, since taking damage to generate an attack boost is not that optimal. With this in mind, we can already remove 2 characters from the equation. Chongyun and Diluc not only make no use of shields, but make no use of HP percent either, leaving us with only Beidou and Noelle as potential candidates.
And they were roommates.
Before we go on though, everything said in this video can be simply disregarded by saying, it's my game and I play how I want, idiot. Or, I made the bell work on X character, you just need this, this and that. And while those may seem a bit rude, they are far from lies. The good thing about Genshin Impact is that no matter how weak something is on paper, there's always a way to make it work. That being said, only a small percentage of the player base has even grinded the game to the point where they have every asset necessary to make anything work, and due to that, the opinions I expressed from this point forward regarding how the weapon performs are mostly centered around the average meta for most players, unless stated otherwise. With that out of the way, don't use the bell on Noelle. Really. See this little part down here? More damage when shielded? Ignore it. When you take into consideration the rest of the weapon and Noelle's kit, there's one mediocre reason to use this against 100 good reasons not to. Noelle's kit does not benefit off of HP percent. The healing and damage from her bursts all stem from her defense, which is why the wipe line has forever been the free-to-play meta for her since 1.0. Shield damage absorption, defense. Burst damage, defense. Healing, defense. Meta artifact selection, defense. The little bit down here saying that you'll do more damage when shielded is nice, but under a much more different context. Not only is it a very negligible percentage, 12% really isn't a lot, when everything else about the sword directly contradicts not only Noelle's kit, but also the weapon's description itself, you're left without much reason to use it. Beidou, on the other hand, for sure benefits more from the bell than Noelle does, but even then, it's not by much, and let's say there's a reason why you never see people recommending this on her. Beidou has two interesting alternatives to use. Firstly, a less used but still highly interesting physical set, which is like a diet version of Razor, and what I believe to be the most used playstyle because of her scaling, and not field DPS with electro application for other units, like a diet version of the Shogun. The part of her kit that scales off of HP is her shield, for some reason, but take this into consideration for a moment. Her shield, at least in the shielding department, is bad. Okay, it's not entirely horrible, and obviously not the worst shield in the game. Of course, it's a shield, so you can have damage reduction, but it's overpowered by stronger and cheaper alternatives, and not the focus of her kit anyway, which is why she has electro damage as her ascension stat. And here's the thing. After 1.3, elemental shields that are not Geo became a lot worse, since now Geo is simply better at everything because it tanks all sorts of damage, unlike other elemental shields generated by crystallized reactions, which have only damage absorption based on the shield's element itself. And curiously enough, for both off-field DPS and physical DPS, there are two craft weapons out there, a recurring theme in this video, which completely stomp the barrel in terms of utility, those being the Snow Tomb Star Silver and the Prototype Archaic. The only reason I could maybe see anyone using this seriously, apart from, being the only great sword you have, to make her shield stronger, is if you need one unit to tank your way through Inazuma. It's a viable strategy, maybe, but only in 1 out of the 7 nations, and not something which I think it's worth shifting between weapons and artifacts all the time for. I cannot deny though, you'll not be taking electro damage anytime soon. Apart from that, little to no reason to use the bell, if you have anything else. And I mean anything else. As the versions went by, few things of note happened to change the state of the bell, apart from maybe the buff to Geo shields indirectly nerfing the bell's shield, since now they do the bell's job, but objectively better. It's not a great look. And it's about to get worse. 1.1 saw the addition of Xinyan, who scales off of attack and physical and doesn't benefit at all from the bell, unless you consider this shield which scales off of defense. What? 1.5 added Eula, who scales off of physical damage and doesn't benefit at all from the bell. 2.0 introduced Sayu, who scales off of attack and doesn't benefit at all from the bell. And finally 2.3 introduced Ito, first named Arataki, who scales off of defense and doesn't benefit at all from the bell. It seemed like MiHoYo had all but forgotten about the existence of this weapon, and I don't think that is warranted at all. Think back to what I said in the beginning of the video. What use does a weapon have without a character to wield it? But then again, it puts into question why the bell was ever added in the first place if no one could actually use it. Hell, for as stupid as the eye perception and rain slasher were, and still are, at least they worked better as last resort situations on some characters. Unlike this fucking thing, it seemed like all hope was lost for this claymore. From the very beginning it was doomed to be lost in obscurity, a Wish exclusive 4-star in the sea of mediocrity usually composed of 3 stars and below. But then, when all seemed to be lost, Sumeru happened. And Sumeru took a long time to be released in comparison to the bell, but also it was pretty fucking big. I could definitely go on and on about every little detail Sumeru did right when it was first implemented, but I will instead go the other way and focus on an addition which went over, or rather below, most people's heads when the update was first released. Meet Dori, full name Dori Sangemabe, a 4-star Electro Claymore healer with an affinity for HP. Eureka! Up until this very moment, Genshin Impact had a considerable amount of support healers, the likes of Barbara, Kokomi, Jean, Bennett, Chi-Chi, and Diona come to mind. A few things about this rowdy bunch can be noted, specifically how there are no dedicated claymore healers. You might turn to Noelle and say, oh, but Noelle is a claymore healer, and well, yeah, you're not wrong, but Noelle is like everything at once. It's cheating to use her in any discussion. Dottie is maybe the first ever character to be added to the game which could have the bell as a reasonable free-to-play alternative, or as close to free-to-play as it gets. Interestingly enough, during the creation of this script I got Dottie for the first time ever, which doesn't really mean anything since I was going to say the exact same thing I'm going to say now anyway. Dottie has a considerably elemental skill, but the focus of her kit is without a doubt her elemental burst, which summons a genie lamp that regenerates a bit of energy for the active character and heals them based on Dottie's max HP. Alright, does the bell finally, at long last, have a valuable character to be used on? Well, the short answer is yes. But, the long answer requires a bit more looking into. Dottie is kind of mid. Alright, hold on, let me explain. Admittedly, that is rude of me, a Noelle main, to say, but hey, if Genshin Labs says Dottie is C tier, then Dottie is, without any question or possibility of debate, C tier. But even if she weren't, in most situations there was already a character added not long before her, which people consider to perform much better, and that's Cookie Shinobu. And not only that, but Cookie is objectively better and prettier and cooler than Dottie. Nevertheless, you could say that about many other characters, so disregard that and let me tell you about the weapon and how she can use it. The bell on Dottie is useful, sure, but my idea while writing this script is that it's better to use it only in a last resort situation, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. I took to a lot of guides on YouTube to confirm my suspicions, and sure enough, that's what people said too.
And unfortunately, despite her being an HP scaling claymore user, using the Bell or Fairest Shadow, which have HP secondary stats, are heavily discouraged on her since ER weapons are just massively better for optimizing her stats.
Before moving on, I did also want to quickly say that I wouldn't recommend going the Bell. I'm just mentioning this because I know I'll get a lot of questions about it. Yes, it's an HP scaling claymore, so you can technically use it for your healing if you have no other option, but an energy recharge claymore, a more supportive one, will usually just be better overall and can even end up giving you more healing by having an efficient passive that saves you a ton of energy, so you can build more HP on your artifacts and have to worry less about energy recharge, giving you more healing overall, or more damage in the case of like Forest Regalia.
In Dottie's case, energy recharge will always be better than HP percent on a weapon, especially when you consider how many HP and healing related artifacts there already are, and how her Ascension stat is already HP percent. It's a similar case with, for example, Bennett. He needs a lot of energy recharge to stay with his burst active at all times, but also a high base attack for the best support capabilities. It's a trade you have to make and decide which one works better. Would you use an ER sword like the Sacrificial Sword, or a sword with high attack like, for example, the Aquila Favonian? But the HP Dottie receives from artifacts is already good enough for healing, which in most cases nullifies the need for an HP sword almost entirely. Since she needs her burst up to heal, unlike say Barbara who can heal with both skill and burst, or Bennett who has energy recharge as his ascension stat, it's better to use something like the Favonian's Greatsword or even the Forest Regalia if you have a Dendro team with her. But if you really want to use the Bell on Dottie, or Murn Assembly is just the only one you have, try looking for artifacts which give you more energy recharge, since you're going to be needing a lot of that and your weapon will not be covering it. Maybe throw this on there, or this if you get good energy recharge rolls. I wish I could go more in depth into these playstyles, but like, the game is easy as hell, it's not really that complicated. Still though, even with the addition of Dottie, there was still not a single character who could make use of the Bell and all of its stats in a viable manner. Is that because the Bell's stats make absolutely no sense and don't work properly off each other? Yes. But even then, we're still not done here, as the ever-expanding Bell meta would have another addition to its roster 5 versions later, and probably the character you've been waiting for me to talk about the most. The moment version 3.5 released, people were skeptical. Not because the version was setting itself up to be entirely terrible, but because of this girl, Dihya. Dihya was set up to be entirely terrible, and the biggest disappointment in Genshin Impact history. And... look, I'm personally a very optimistic dude when it comes to characters being added. I like making units considered underwhelming work, and one of the best aspects of any game for me is the range of customization you can have with a given aspect, no matter if it's entirely usable from a meta perspective or not. I love Dihya. She's possibly my favorite character out of the ones seen in Sumeru. But Dihya is just something else. The most apt comparison I can make is that she hits like a child in a pillow fight. And the pillow is empty and the child is on his deathbed. And by God, I still use her. Just don't forget to not jump when using her burst. Dihya's recent addition in 3.5 rounds out the roster of characters to possibly use the bell up to this point. A comfortable 3, maybe 4, which you might think is not really that good. And it really is not. But even then, in my humble opinion, Dihya is the best case made for using the bell for 2 reasons. One of those being significantly funnier than the other. For the less funny and more usable alternative, a huge part of Dihya's kit is similar to Hu Tao's, in the sense that they're both pirate characters which benefit from HP percent, with Dihya, like Dori, even having her ascension stat as HP percent. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, but famous YouTube personality and funny man Maple Cat stars. Hu Tao is a great character, while Dihya isn't. And... yeah. So let's say you want to use the bell on Dihya. It's pretty good. Wait, what? For Dihya's first playstyle, burst DPS, the bell does indeed help since her burst scales quite well off HP percent, which is a first for this list. I tested it out, and even on my Dihya with subpar artifacts and level 7 talents, I was pleasantly surprised to see how well she did. These numbers may seem low, but trust me, they're very gorgeous to me. That's where it ends though, because as is typical for this weapon, it's outshined, or at the very least on the same level as its counterparts. However, I will say it's by no means a bad alternative, and Dihya is certainly my favorite character to use this weapon on. Which is not saying much given the competition. Just a heads up though, while just the HP percent part works okay, if you're planning on using a shield to get that juicy 12% bonus, you're better off having someone else do the shielding, because the bell's shield is made of paper. Dihya's second playstyle of support works fine too, with the upside being pyro application and resistance to interruption, and the downside being that it's not a geo shield, or not even a pyro shield. However, that's not to say it's bad, just having the barrel allows for Dihya and the units within her skill to not get tossed around at all, even when facing a Ruin Guard Tornado and something which is further amplified with HP artifacts. If you have the Ocean Hued Clam set though, you can even tank the sheer Golden Dragon Spine. I'm not sure why you want to do that, but it's a possibility. In all seriousness however, alright, maybe not, it's time to talk about the less serious but objectively more fun part of the spectrum. You might have seen this video on your recommendation feed by now, showcasing an unkillable Dihya built with the Ocean Hued Clam. This piqued my curiosity, mostly because I have never actually watched the video and was eager to see how this would work. In theory, what happens here is the following. Dihya's 4th Ascension passive heals her for 20% of her HP when her HP is below 40%, and will recover 6% more health every 2 seconds for the next 10 seconds, so basically she heals herself a lot. The Ocean Hued Clam set, on the other hand, accumulates the healing received by the character and explodes at the end of its duration, dealing 90% of the healing received as damage. You can maybe already see where we're going with this. In theory, this allows Dihya to, and I'm not joking, kill bosses while doing literally nothing. She would deal damage while and by healing herself, which is further amplified by 2 Hydra characters in the party purely for resonance. This video, however, is using the bacon, so I took it upon myself to test this out with the bell enhance. I farmed for a decent claim set, which I actually didn't have up to this point, and went testing. And by God, I'm not even joking, it really does in work. This is unironically one of the funniest things I've seen in this game in a while. The mightiest brawler in Sumeru killing enemies by literally standing still. It goes without saying though, this is not meant to be a serious build, and I highly doubt anyone would actually want to willingly play Dihya like this. It's slow as hell, it shows how bad the Bell shield actually is, and it sure wouldn't be a good look for the desert's fiercest warrior to get tossed around like this. Oh wait, that's just Dihya overall. But it's still something which I thought would be worth bringing up since I haven't actually laughed this hard with this game in a while. It's so fucking goofy how this works. This puts any AFK grinding games to shame. Disregarding the meme build and going back to the support part of things, in my own opinion, Dihya is probably the best case to be made for using the Bell, which honestly isn't saying much when you can still replace it by a fucking Ferris Shadow. Because that's all the Bell is, a stat stick, purely because the passive is completely negligible. Nevertheless, if you try hard enough, there's some actual profits to be made here. It's just not much. Like 3 refined and 10 primogems. This all brings us to today, which is not long after Dihya's release and where the Bell still sees little use, arguably just as little as when it was first implemented. And honestly, that's both sad and confusing. Sad in the sense that it took so long to get to a point where the Bell could even consider being used in the first place, and how when we got there it proved to still be mediocre and easily replaceable, and confusing because I don't understand why it was ever in the game. Really, before this version, the Wanderer's Troop series could have very well erased this weapon from its lineup and no one would really notice, unless it's someone like me who likes to point out lore inconsistencies. And it's a shame too, because the lore behind this weapon is great and it looks pretty as all hell before the Ascensions. It's actually kind of incredible how so many characters were added over the versions that could make use of the Bell, if the Bell were anything but a claymore. The state of the Bell is still the same as it was before, bad. But with a little more work it could be not as bad, and let's take a look at how that could be in a hypothetical world where miHoYo reworks weapons. Just give Hutao's kit to a claymore character. Seriously though, let's try to think of a rework for this massive piece of junk. There's 3 parts of the Bell: the substat, the shield, and the damage when shielded. The substat in my opinion could stay, but the description needs an entire rework. The Bell shield is basically useless, and besides, doing more damage when shielded is already the Lewis series thing. What this description would be reworked towards though is as debatable as ever, and it would depend on whether this weapon would be focused towards damage or support. If it's the former, give it something related to crit rate or crit damage. If it's the latter, something to do with energy recharge. I wish I could specify in the description, but as you may have noticed by now, I would likely only make the Bell worse. In any of the 2 cases, the characters most usually paired with this weapon, Dihya and Dori, and maybe even Beidou, could finally have a chance to call this weapon a viable and actually useful, with both passive and substat taking into consideration 4-star alternative. I mean, I'm not saying the Bell in its current state is completely unplayable. Just like I mentioned before, you can make literally anything in Genshin Impact good with enough effort, and that's the beauty of the game. But it's simply not worth it. And not when the claymore characters which could use this weapon benefit tremendously more from other cheaper options. But then again, whenever Fontaine comes out, a character could be added which goes extremely well with the current state of the Bell, making it their best free-to-play alternative and completely contradicting this video. See, here's the problem with making a video like this. Genshin Impact receives updates like every month or so, and the possibility of something being added that completely changes the way you view a certain aspect is always present. But until that happens, we can all point and laugh or cry at this sword's unfortunate in-game state. Thanks for watching.